Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Just Kiradavis. I am your host, Just Kiradavis. Here I am. I haven't done a show in a minute because I've been on, holiday break and then filling in on radio. I filled in on David Webb this week. And this morning I talked about the New York Times Marjorie Taylor Greene profile. And I thought I had the whole article and I thought, you know what, this is a great way to help people see what was in there without having to click on it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So if you're watching me, I have to apologize to my husband for these glasses. He hates when I wear these glasses. He says I look like an old lady. I think I am an old lady. I think I'm kind of an old lady. Okay, so I read, by the way, go to all my socials. You can find me on X, Kira Davis, Kira Davis. You can find me on Instagram at just Kira Davis, JOST Kira Davis. It's kind of a different experience over there. So fun. And then go to my Substack, justkiradavis.com. And then, of course, I have another Christmas podcast, which we do Christmas all year round over there. It's called Journey to Christmas Land. My friend Amelia Hamilton and I review cheesy Christmas movies, mostly from Hallmark or Great American Family, but we've been venturing out into like Netflix and that part of the world lately. So yeah, check me out there. Um, I think it's JT Christmas Land here on X or JT Christmas Land on Instagram, and you can go to Substack. Okay, let's get to it because you can tell maybe I'm having trouble firing my neurons right now. Had to get up at 4 a.m. to do 3 hours of radio, and David Webb's callers are really smart, so had to really use a lot of brain power. All right. Well, I wanted to read you this article from the New York Times because I know a lot of you have questions about MTG, what's going on with her. I'm getting the same kind of questions that I'm seeing about Candace, and I really don't want to get into this right now, but I know that people are starting to wonder about Megan Tucker, all of that. I don't want to get into that because I'm a big Megan fan, and so I'm just sort of observing. But I know it seems like a lot of people are peeling off. It seems like it seems like the movement is breaking apart. And I don't think it is, actually. And I've said this other places, I'll say it again, but I think we're purging. This is a market correction. It's what's happening. We took on a lot of extra people and points of view to win in 2024. That meant that the movement, and I'm a conservative, so that's what I mean when I say the movement, but the conservative movement, the conservative thought movement, we had necessarily had to dilute ourselves a little bit in order to take on the other people in the movement that we needed to help us win. And that was fine. You got to do what you got to do. That's why Trump is a populist president and not a conservative president. But the result is that a lot of people gained power and influence that perhaps hadn't earned it, hadn't really been here in the trenches when we were fighting our way up years ago from the Obama administration. And also, it also meant that some people are here in our movement who are really just here for the accolades. They're really just here for the professional advancement. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of those people. I know that Candace Owens is one of those people. I probably in the new year, I'm going to do an episode where I just read some of her archives from back before she was Candace Owens. And she was just sort of some boss babe blogger. And it's nothing scandalous in there. It's just a real eye opener into her personality and the way her life shaped her. Think this is the sort of the situation with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think they're kind of two sides of the same coin, or maybe they're just the same coin, which is I do think that Marjorie Taylor Greene has ideals and principles. I don't doubt that. I don't think Candace does, but they're both opportunists. They're both opportunists. And so if their ideals and principles line up, great. Well, Candace has none. I don't think she has any. But MTG, I think she does in a lot of cases, feel strongly about certain things, not all the things. I don't think that her claim to being a conservative was necessarily the complete truth. Perhaps she was a Republican or leaned conservative. But anyway, I read the New York Times article. Thank you very much. Somebody gifted me a subscription. Somebody gifted me a free view to this article so that I could read it. And it was very interesting. And I think it will answer a lot of your questions. A lot of you out there are like, why is she turning all of a sudden? Or why is she like this? Or maybe you think you know, but you're not sure. I thought, let's dig into this together. So I'm just going to read it to you. That's the podcast today. Just going to read you this article so you don't have to. It's by Robert Draper. over at the New York Times. It's titled, "I Was Just So Naive, Inside Marjorie Taylor Greene's Breakup with Trump," by Robert Draper. And Robert says, by the way, he says that for this article, he conducted 2 lengthy interviews with Marjorie Taylor Greene and spoke to close associates, congressional colleagues, and White House officials. Here we go. Hang on, hang tight, don't go anywhere. I just need to make sure no one's yelling at me. All right, here we go. 11 days after Charlie Kirk was killed in September, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the third-term Georgia Congresswoman, was watching his memorial service on TV as the luminaries of the conservative movement and the Trump administration gathered to pay tribute to the young activist. What stayed with Greene long afterward were the last 2 speakers who took the stage. First, there was Kirk's widow, Erica, who stood in white before the crowd filling the Arizona stadium, lifting her tear-filled eyes, and said that she forgave her husband's killer. And then there was President Trump. He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great purpose, he said of Kirk. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. Can I just stop right there? I'm going to get back to this. Can I just stop right there and talk about this moment for just a second? Because a lot of conservative Christians like me have criticism for Trump in that moment. They felt like it was the wrong thing for him to say, and we don't say those things. And of course, we don't hate and we don't encourage people to hate. We should be more like Erica, less like Trump. First of all, Trump's not a spiritual leader. I'm not even sure he's really a Christian. I think he's searching, but I'm not sure if he's a Christian. But second of all, somebody killed his surrogate son. Do you know what I mean? Like if Erica had gone up there and said, I don't know if I can forgive this guy, everybody would have understood. Us Christians, we Christians would have said, well, maybe you should think about that, or we'll pray for you because we know that eventually you're going to need to get there. But people would have understood. Why can't Trump get that same? Trump wasn't there as a luminary, as this author puts it. He was there as a surrogate father to Charlie. Charlie was his son. And I think that Trump changed. Of course he did, because his friend got killed. So I'm perfectly fine with what he said. Is that what I would have said as a Christian? No, of course not. Of course not. But I don't understand just the hate and the criticism. I understand the hate. He invoked hate. He can take it too. But I don't necessarily understand the criticism from Christian conservatives. Like he lost his son and he's angry and it had just happened. So, all right, back to the article. That was absolutely the worst statement Greene wrote to me in a text message months after the memorial service. And the contrast between Erica Kirk and the president was clarifying, she added. It just shows where his heart is. And that's the difference with her having a sincere Christian faith and proves that he does not have any faith. He may or may not have faith. You know what I got out of that passage, you guys? She texts back and forth with the New York Times reporter. She's got his number. And for however that was going, now he's a smart reporter. Clearly he was. He's keeping that line of communication open, but she's not closing it. Right? They're having enough casual conversations about this to where she can say something like that. That was the worst statement. That just shows where his heart is. All right, moving on. It also, Greene said, clarified something about herself. Over the past 5 years, as Trump's most notorious acolyte in Congress, she had adopted his unrepentant pugilism as her own. Our side has been trained by Donald Trump to never apologize and to never admit when you're wrong, she told me in her Capitol Hill office one afternoon in early December. You just keep pummeling your enemies, no matter what. And as a Christian, I don't believe in doing that. I agree with Erica Kirk, who did the hardest thing possible and said it out loud. Greene's reaction put her in a distinct minority among influential conservative figures. Almost immediately after Kirk was declared dead, many of her comrades on the right, the billionaire Elon Musk, why do you have to, why, we all know that Elon Musk is a billionaire, maybe close to damn near a trillionaire. We know he runs SpaceX. We know he runs X. Are there any qualifiers that you need to put in front of Elon? Like these people just can't help themselves. The billionaire Elon Musk, the Fox News host Jesse Waters, and podcaster Steve Bannon labeled the killing an act of war by the left and exhorted their audience to think of it in similar terms. Okay. Doesn't seem that crazy to me. All right. But Greene, who for years took a backseat to no one when it came to reactionary rhetoric, going so far before she was in office as to, but Greene, this is awkward, I'm sorry, but Greene, who for years took a backseat to no one when it came to reactionary rhetoric, going so far before she was in office as to, there's a lot of comments, going so far before she was in office as to accuse Democrats, including Speaker Nancy Pelosi, of treasonous conduct, and adding that treason was punishable by imprisonment or death, realized that she had suddenly lost all appetite for vengeance. Oh, isn't that interesting? She later told a friend who confirmed the exchange, after Charlie died, I realized that I'm a part of this toxic culture. I really started looking at my faith. I wanted to be more like Christ. Gosh, isn't this really interesting? Isn't this interesting? Because I would, although Charlie and I were friendly, we weren't friends. I didn't even know him that well, but I had a criticism for him. I often disagreed, just as somebody on his own side. But I had a reputation for being critical in a friendly way of Charlie. And Greene would have counted herself as his friend. Now here we are after Charlie was killed. I feel the opposite. She said, I want to be more like Christ. I want to be more like Christ too, but I want to be like the second version, the one that's coming back to kill people and exact revenge on the wicked. I want to be like that, Jesus. That's an option too. I want to be like the Jesus who turns over tables. That's an option too. And I find it interesting that that she wants to go to the Jesus that the libs love the best, right? And that's a very real. I mean, Lord, I'm not besmirching any version of you, Lord. Obviously, I just find it interesting that her and I are sort of crossing now, crisscrossing, because I feel angry for Charlie, for his family, but for our nation. And I think that the time for passivity is over. And there is a version of Christ. There is a version of this kingdom that is a warrior version. And the Bible's filled with those stories. Even Peter was carrying a sword. So that's an option. And I think when you're at war, you can be a warrior. We're at war. What I see is MTG retreating or going to the enemy, as we're soon going to find out. All right. That was when the stress fracture that had been steadily widening between Greene and her political godfather became an irrevocable or irrevocable? I'm going to say it both ways, and then you decide which way makes me sound smarter. And her political godfather became an irrevocable break. She had increasingly taken stands apart from the president and the Republican Party, declaring the war in Gaza a genocide, objecting to cryptocurrency and artificial intelligence policies that, from her perspective, prioritize billionaire donors over working class Americans, criticizing the Trump administration for approving foreign student visas, for enacting tariffs that hurt businesses in her district, and for allowing Obamacare subsidies to expire. That's weird too, isn't it? I'm sorry, I paused there, but I didn't realize, I don't think I heard this part, that she was criticizing Trump for allowing Obamacare subsidies to expire. That's a red flag. The other stuff, there's a lot of wiggle room within the Republican and conservative movement for, I mean, we're watching what's happening with the influencers on Gaza and all of that. So I'm definitely not um, coming down on her side, but I'm just saying there's room. But the fact that she would be critical of allowing Obamacare subsidies to expire, it's a red flag. All right, moving on. Most significant, she defied the president and compliant House Republican leaders as she argued that all investigative material pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein should be released. The Epstein files represent everything wrong with Washington, Greene told me in early, am I missing a page here? In December. Rich, powerful elites doing horrible things and getting away with it, and the women are the victim. As Greene made her opinions known, first to Trump and his team, and then publicly, she tested the affection of the man who once, and then publicly, she tested the affection of the man who once said of her in a posted statement endorsing her reelection, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a warrior in Congress. She doesn't back down, she doesn't give up, and she has always been with Trump. Now the cascade of perceived transgressions culminated in the president's tarring her as Marjorie Taylor Greene in a social media post on November 15th. 6 days later, she announced in a video that she would resign from Congress on January 5th, a year before her term ends. It's another red flag, right? If it's about the people and you care about the people and you care about justice and you care about helping people and making sure that Congress does its job, then you don't leave before your job is up, right? They elected you for this term. And it's such a razor thin margin anyway. That's red flag number 2. I have covered Greene. This is our author again. I have covered Greene, who is 51. Marjorie Greene's 51. I'm 51. I'm 51, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is 51. I have covered Greene, who is 51, extensively over the past 5 years, and it was evident during this visit that on one level, nothing had changed. Just outside the front door of her office stood the familiar placard blaring, "There are 2 genders, male and female." One sign on the door warned visitors that no foreign lobbying was allowed. Another featured the image of Charlie Kirk hanging on the wall hanging on the wall. And inside the waiting area were fan letters from all over America, some dating to 2021, her first year in office. The television was, as always, set to Fox News, though Greene told me she no longer watched the network because she found it factually unreliable. Look, I don't mind if someone says Fox is factually unreliable. I get it. Not every Republican likes Fox. But I would be curious to know what channel she thinks is factually reliable. I wonder if she would think that her fiance's channel is factually reliable. That's Real America's Voice. She is engaged to Brian, is it Green? Is his name Green too? No, it's not Green. From Real America's Voice. And Glenn. She's engaged to him. Real America's Voice is a pro-Trump hardcore. This is a hardcore right-wing channel. It's a pro-Trump channel, and she's engaged to him. So I wonder if she thinks that that is factual. And then I wonder if that's a conflict of interest for Brian. I don't know. The fact that her office remained the same reflected Greene's sense of where she stood. She continued to be faithful to Trump's campaign promises. If anything, she said, her sin was to have regarded them as more than slogans. That's what I'm guilty of, she told me. That's what made me, in the president's words, a traitor, which is truly believing in Make America Great Again, which I perceive to be America first. Greene's last exchange with the president was by text message on November 16th. It gets interesting here. That day, she received an anonymous email in her personal Gmail account. That's different than, no, I didn't catch this the first time. I'll finish. That day, she received an anonymous email in her personal Gmail account that threatened her college-age son. Derek will have his life snuffed out soon. Better watch his back. The email subject heading used the nickname Trump had given her the day before. Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to be insensitive. Believe me, if you're a Black conservative, you've definitely had people threatening your life. I mean, if you've been in this business for any amount of time, probably on either side, you've experienced some kind of online death threat. I haven't had any, fortunately enough. I'm not big enough, I don't think, to have any that I need to take seriously, but they come in the email. But this wasn't sent to her government email or private email. It says private Gmail, but is Gmail private? Gmail is not private. It also reads like Jussie Smollett wrote it, right? Someone should have tagged on the end there, "Oh, this is MAGA country." It's very, so I don't know. I'm suspicious from the start. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt because it is serious. But keep that in mind as I continue. Greene promptly texted the information to the president. All right, she has the president's phone number. Okay, a lot of people have the president's phone number, actually. He's notorious for texting people and calling people in the middle of the night to wish them happy birthday or ask them a question or just bounce an idea off of them. So Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of those people who has or had at least access. And that's a big deal. Need you to understand how intoxicating that type of power is. To even be next to that kind of power is intoxicating. My husband always asks me, he's rather naive about politics, and he always says, like, I can't believe, why would this person do this or steal this or act like this? They have all the money in the world. They don't need money. And I always say there's the poors, right? Those of us who don't know what generational wealth is or that extreme kind of wealth is. We think, yeah, we'd get a lump sum, we'd get our nut, and we would live for the rest of our lives off of it. But the powerful, they don't trade in dollars, they trade in influence and they trade in power. That's what they want. That's the currency. So it's very, very intoxicating when you get next to it in any capacity. And you can just see this in action probably in your own office or at your church, right? Even in your neighborhood. Everyone, even at high school, everybody wants to be next to who is perceived as the most powerful person, or most people do. And those who don't sort of have this internal sense that that person maybe isn't safe unless you're going to be willing to be sucked into their orbit. So I just think you need to recall or think about as I read through this that MTG had access to the president, and that's access that very few people in the world have. And that's intoxicating. And some people, if they're not rooted in something firm, in real principles and real purpose, you can get carried away with it. Even people who are rooted can get carried away with it. That's why you need Jesus, everybody. I know she's talking a big game about being a Christian, but this is why you need Jesus, so that you can stay rooted in what you believe. I'm not making any aspersions about her faith. I'm not casting any aspersions on it, and I'm not making any judgment. And I promise you, I'm not even being facetious about that. I really don't know, because Christians have all kinds of disagreements too, right? Even in politics. All right. So I stopped at Greene promptly texted the information to the president. According to a source familiar with the exchange, his long reply made no mention of her son. Instead, Trump insulted her in personal terms. And when she replied that children should remain off limits from their disagreements, Trump responded that she only had herself to blame. Now, we don't have the text. Okay, I don't know if she gave it to Robert and Robert didn't publish it. Or I don't know if you don't publish, maybe that's just bad form to publish text from the president. I have no idea why. I have an idea. I have an idea of why she wouldn't provide the text and publish the text. But yeah, and don't stop here. I'm going to read. Listen, he contacted the White House for comment. I'm going to read, and it's very illuminating as to maybe what is really going down between MTG and Donald Trump. But given the Jussie Smollettness of it all, and given the fact that she was insistent on, making sure that this is my son and he's off limits. And the way she describes it, again, this is how she describes it. We all, sometimes we lie, but sometimes we hear what we want to hear, or we see what we want to see. So, but the way she describes it, he didn't care and he just went off on her and just called her a bunch of names and said she only had herself to blame. Now, I believe that part. I actually believe that. I believe that somewhere along the lines of that communication, at some point, Trump did send her the word, "You only have yourself to blame." I believe that part is true. I don't know what it was about, though. So he goes on. Okay, this is where it gets good. In response, a detailed questions and request for comment. In response to detailed questions and a request for comment, Davis Ingle, a White House spokesman, wrote in a statement, President Trump remains the undisputed leader of the greatest and fastest growing political movement in American history, the MAGA movement. On the other hand, Congresswoman Greene is quitting on her constituents in the middle of her term and abandoning the consequential fight we're in. We don't have time for her petty bitterness. If I had a mic, I would drop the marker. Right? That's classic Trump. I know this is the spokesperson. Classic Trump. You brand your response. You brand the response. So, by the way, and you campaign. By the way, don't forget that Trump is responsible for the greatest economy, most booming economy, or whatever he said. He's the head of the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement is Trump, and you're just a quitter. And he's not wrong about that. He's not wrong about that. And anybody who hires her out of this position should take that into account. That she didn't finish the job people elected her to do. The president's banishment of Greene can be viewed as the most recent of several cracks in a MAGA coalition that seemed shatterproof after Trump's reelection. The president's brash inauguration day prediction of a golden age has not borne out for most Americans. Honey, we're not there yet. We're not in the golden age. Golden age is going to be 2026. We're setting it up. But golden age 2026, that's 250. Everything's falling apart now. I get it. I was talking about this on David Webb's show today. Everything looks like it's falling apart, but I believe that that's what has to happen. We've got a lot of broken pieces everywhere. We need to just shatter it and rebuild it, right? Burn it all down. This is a market correction. I'm not too worried about any of this so far. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We know the liberals are never going to admit that things are getting better. With polling increasingly showing a drop in his approval ratings And in the Republican forecast for next year's midterm elections, a few voices on the right have dared to openly question the president's judgment, even while fighting amongst themselves over how best to interpret and execute America First. Among them, Greene may be the least likely of Trump's conscientious objectors. It has been tempting for some observers to predict that the meteoric crash and burn of the MAGA movement's loudest champion signals the beginning of the end for its leader as well. But it is Greene who is exiting the stage while Trump continues to dominate it. Very good point, sir. As he did through the impeachments and the indictments and other controversies that no other politician would have survived. Thank you. This is a great point for him to acknowledge. And I say this about everybody who takes on Trump. You know, Newsom here in California, he's doing that. He's doing his, I'm gonna mock Trump. I'm gonna pretend, I'm gonna act like I'm Trump. You know, or who else takes on Trump, or, you know, Ilhan Omar, or whoever is talking crap about him. I think I saw Anthony Scaramucci back out there on the scene. What rock did he climb out from under? I saw him out there talking about Trump. Anyways, I wouldn't take on Trump in the media. He's 11 billion to 0 when it comes to attacks on his reputation. And call him Teflon Don for nothing. Greene acknowledged to me that her abrupt ejection from Trump's orbit is unlikely to diminish his stature with his party or his base. Well, of course, because nobody cares about you, Marjorie Taylor Greene. You're not MAGA. You're just some chick who had a loud mouth for a minute. You were helpful. You were a useful idiot for a second. No, it's not a surprise. Again, to me, this is a window into her psychosis or her psychology. I didn't mean to say psychosis. I really didn't. That was a Freudian slip, I guess. But into her psyche, I should say. It's a window into that. Where she's saying that, you know, he's not going to get me getting kicked out of the party isn't going to do anything. No, of course not. It's not going to do anything to him. Who are you? Who were you in the first place? Even for you to say that is ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, even to have the thought that there could even in some world be some way that Trump would have his stature diminished by the exit of Marjorie Taylor Greene a year before her job ends. He's trash talked so many people, Greene told me. I promise you, I don't hold myself up as more special than others he's done this to. I get it. This is Trump. This is what he does. It is. It is. That is what he does. And by the way, I'm not defending. I don't think she's lying about a lot of the tone and the tenure of people around Trump. You've got to really run the gauntlet to get next to that guy, because look at what he makes you do. If you go into the Oval Office with Trump, you're standing behind him for 2 hours. So you better have your knee braces on. You know, you better have your comfy shoes on. You better come ready to help push the Trump brand, acknowledge all of the good work he's doing. You notice that everybody around the table, they always say, thanks to President Trump. President Trump is doing that. Some of it might be self-preservation, but some of it is branding. And they're on the branding team. They're on the marketing team. MTG thought that the marketing team was there for her. Still, her 5-year trajectory on the national scene, from the president's embrace to her excommunication, serves as an apt parable for this political movement. If Trump engendered loyalty on an unprecedented scale, Greene was his most fervent, high-profile loyalist, and now his most unlikely apostate. She arrived in Washington as one kind of misfit and departs as another. I think that's another window. The misfit, right? There are some people who really depend on being the fly in the ointment. That's their Thomas Massey, anybody? That's their whole gig. So when we won, and then we sent a bunch of MAGA people, or we, you know, at least let the MAGA wave sweep over who was in Congress, she wasn't so special anymore. None of this is normal like the rest of the Trump era, but because it represents an evolution for Greene, she may yet again prove to be a harbinger of a sea change in the movement she once helped to lead. The movement is not changing, and I don't care what you see. I don't care. I don't care. X is not the real world. I don't care what you see on X. I don't care what you see on that TPUSA stage. Like, Trump still has a very strong MAGA base. It's kind of the problem, because we need Republicans to figure out how to win that base and motivate that base, and they don't seem to be able to do it. That's a Trump thing. So I don't think it's changing. What we're seeing, again, to repeat, is a market correction. Greene arrived in Congress during its weirdest time, as its weirdest character, a former believer in the QAnon conspiracy theory. What's the QAnon conspiracy theory? I mean, I guess it's the 2020 election stolen, which is turning out to not be. Uh, a CrossFit competitor, see that, and wealthy co-owner of her family's construction firm. This is starting to come together? With no political experience, now jetting around on Air Force One with the President of the United States, endeavoring to overturn the 2020 election results. 3 days after Greene was sworn into office in 2021, the Capitol fell siege. The Capitol fell siege to rioters trying to stop the certification of Joe Biden's victory. I don't know why. It's such a hysterical way to describe it. According to Greene, she found herself sequestered with other House members in a conference room and arguing with other Republican freshman Kat Kamak of Florida. BLM and Antifa have broken into the Capitol, Greene insisted. Grabbing Greene's shoulders, Kamak firmly replied, Marjorie, they're wearing MAGA hats. No, it's all Jussie Smollett, first of all. It's all very Jussie Smollett. But I'm enjoying it. That's hilarious. Well, I'll just sit with that little image in my head because it makes her look so silly. And then the truth is, she's probably closer to the truth than K-Mac was, but I just love that they're making fun of her. Early that February, I stood outside the Capitol watching Greene hold a news conference. The day before, 11 Republicans joined with a unanimous Democratic House majority in voting to strip Greene of her committee assignments for the incendiary remarks she made before running for office. Now she defiantly proclaimed against all conventional wisdom that her adversaries had it wrong about Trump's demise and that the base had not deserted the exiled former president. The party is his. It doesn't belong to anybody else. She was right. At that time, frankly, I thought she sounded nuts. Did you, Robert? At that time, she sounded nuts? Is that when she sounded nuts to you? Let's see if she got less nuts to Robert. But as the year wore on, Greene's prescience would become as evidence as her emerging star power in the MAGA ecosystem. And I became convinced that in order to understand that ecosystem, it was essential to understand this figure at the heart of it. After months of background interviews with her top aides, I got word she was willing to meet with me. In early 2022, I traveled to Rome, Georgia. Her blah, blah, blah. Her aides nervously buttonholed me in the doorway of the restaurant where Greene and I were due to meet and muttered that everything would have to be off the record. I realized how tenuous the situation was. Greene, a prolific user of the term fake news media, had never sat down with a Times reporter before. Listen, are you still with me? Pay attention to this next part. Pay attention. Greene, a prolific user of the term fake news media, had never sat down with a Times reporter before. It occurred to me that the sum total of what she knew about this news organization and others like it came from Fox News and the Confederates in her impermeable MAGA bubble. In her world, mainstream media outfits were the perpetrators of the Russia hoax and were in league with the Democrats. She ignored them and distrusted them. Robert's describing himself, right? Or at least his side. I'm going to guess that maybe he has to reach outside his bubble for some of the stuff he does at the Times. He's describing himself. I'm willing to bet MTG knows more about the New York Times than he gives MAGA people credit for, because obviously on the right, we're inundated with liberal media all day, every day. We don't even have to go look for it. So we have to go look for our media. But that's neither here nor there. That's actually not what I wanted you to notice here. Here's what I want you to notice. I think that he is right about the idea that the staff, and including MTG, they were nervous and they hadn't really sat down with the enemy, so to speak, before, and they weren't sure. Why does this matter? He seduced her. Remember when I read to you in the beginning of the article, she texted him? So she went from being totally distrusting of the mainstream media to texting this guy casually. That swamp, it gets to you. It gets to you. And especially if you don't have very strong moral character in the first place, if you're willing to bend on your morals in little places here and there in your personal life where it counts, because none of us are sinless, but where it counts, I just think it says something. I think it says something. So, why is she? This is just quite an expose to give to the New York Times of all places. And he said he said he's been conducting these interviews over a series of 2 years. Isn't that what I just read you? Let me go to the top. No, 2 lengthy interviews, not 2 years, my bad. 2 lengthy interviews, but it looked like at least there's a year in here, but I think he said his first interview was in, um, 2021. So, she had never sat down, so she was really new to Congress. She was just up and coming. She was just in the limelight. She just got next to some real power for the first time in her life, and for the first time ever, the mainstream media, the paper of record, was coming to visit her. This woman got seduced straight up. And a good reporter knows how to do that. I'm not saying they had a sexual relationship, but a good reporter knows how to seduce his subject. He took his time. He got her to be his sex buddy. "What brings you to Rome?" she asked as she shook my hand. When I replied, "I'm just here to see you," she blinked in surprise. It seemed to be a source of relief, if perhaps somewhat discombobulating, that I also had a Southern accent and was more interested in her current political beliefs than her previous statements. That none of her off the record marks to me that day appeared in print or on social media further reduced her wariness. Love bombed her. He mirrored. I have a Southern accent too. And don't worry, it's off the record. And also, I'm not going to print any of these statements. You can trust me when I say it's off the record. By the way, should we text? He knew exactly who she was. He's always known exactly who she was. He used her for what she was good for, and then he jettisoned her. And the more I read, the more I realize I think that was right. And it does make me wonder what Brian Glenn is doing over at Real America's Voice. Such an odd thing. Other on the record interviews soon followed, a few in her office, one back in her district, and a couple in Washington restaurants. On the autumn evening of 2022, again, so this is way in the beginning. I'm wondering if she's been compromised for a while. This guy was starting to dig into her in 2022. I don't know, you guys. See, the flags are there. You hear what I'm saying when I say this is a market correction? It's a market correction. It's a market correction. We just had to take on a lot of people because we were in desperate times and every warrior in the battle kind of thing. And now we're purging. Well, the people are just going to purge themselves. They're just going to purge themselves. Trump is like that. He's a clarifying fire, isn't it? Like that. I don't mean to describe him like biblical terms or anything, but there's something very clarifying about his personality where people just become more of who they are around. They don't change who they are, but they become more of who they really are. Let's see. Did she really think that he asked her about the stolen election? Robert, she replied with a searching look. Do you really think Joe Biden got 81 million votes without even campaigning? Yes, I said they counted all the votes. There was a final tally. Why wouldn't I believe it? I don't know. Why wouldn't you believe it? Well, I don't know, Robert. Why wouldn't you believe it? The government said it. I mean, why don't you believe Trump now when he's telling you stuff? The government said it. Why don't you just believe it? Duh. Feeling giddy right now. I don't know why. I feel like I've been drinking and I have not. I think I'm talk drunk because I just got off David Webb show. I soon became accustomed to the "is she as crazy as she seems" queries from the same friends and peers who 15 years earlier had asked me while I was spending time with President G.W. Bush if he was as stupid as he appeared. The answer was a qualified no. And who's George Bush's best friends now? All coming together. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about her. Let her go. Let her go. Greene did harbor a genuine conspiratorial streak, though, even wondering if this or that person wore a wire. But that's not conspiratorial. You're in government. My goodness. Does this guy really report on government? Does he not think government offices are wired? How very odd. How very childish. But she was also becoming an increasingly shrewd and acerbic observer of life on the Hill. By January of 23, the Republicans had reclaimed the House, and Greene had developed a strong alliance with the new Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, who bestowed on her an unofficial seat at the leadership table. Through it all, Greene remained a Trump diehard. She first visited him at Mar-a-Lago in 2021, a time when many other elected Republicans were keeping their distance. 3 months later, when Trump staged his first rally since leaving office, Greene was there at his warm-up act in Ohio, declaring, as a matter of fact, he's the greatest president this country has ever had. By early 2022, she would tell me, Trump had floated the idea of her as his 2024 running mate. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I can imagine someone just sort of saying it offhand or as a joke at a party, like, or saying it in a speech, "Oh, there's Marjorie isn't she so great? Maybe I should make her my running mate." I would believe that. That rolling discussion continued into the summer of 2024, she says, but Trump, she claims, was bothered by her steadfast opposition to abortion, which she has called murder. A White House spokeswoman said that Greene was never under consideration. Vice President J.D. Vance also opposes abortion, but has deferred to Trump's preference to leave the matter up to the state. It's not his preference, it's the law, Robert. It's the law. That's what happened when we repealed Roe v. Wade. She ultimately joined Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, and Donald Trump as early advocates of Vance. All right, yada, yada, yada. I got to move forward. So long, but we're getting to the end here. Greene's fidelity to the MAGA cause masked some private misgivings, she now said. Some of Trump's devotees struck Greene as worshipful in the extreme. For a lot of MAGA, Trump is a savior, and he's like a god to them. She also disliked the unctuous hedonistic posturing at Mar-a-Lago. In particular, she told me recently, I never liked the MAGA Mar-a-Lago sexualization. I believe how women in leadership present themselves sends a message to younger women. She continued, I have two daughters, and I've always been uncomfortable with how these women puff up their lips and enlarge their breasts. I've never spoken about it publicly, but I've been planning to. But I feel like there are a ton of people who would say that about you, Marjorie. I'm not one of them, by the way. I have no problems with the way you've acted in Congress. I think it's fine. But I know criticisms from the left have been, well, this is not ladylike or this is not how you act. But I just find it really strange that she has all this criticism for the Mar-a-Lago crowd and her husband or her fiance is on Real America's Voice. That's the Mar-a-Lago crowd. Gina Loudon has a show on there, doesn't she? She's like best friends with the Trump family. It's so weird. I think it's weird. I don't want to call it a conflict of interest because all news is opinion these days, basically. And it's not like Real America's Voice. I don't think they're not trying to be an objective channel. So no, that's different than someone like CNN trying to say, "Oh, we're totally objective." So I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's interesting. It's very interesting. And the sexualization, that's the wealthy Florida crowd. Trump's always had these women around him. Trump's always had these type of people around him. That's his crowd. I live in Orange County, California. That's the crowd around here. The upper crust, the wealthy, that's the crowd. You're gonna go and you're gonna see lots of boob jobs, and this is literally the land of boob jobs. And that's how they look. Just like if you go to like a meeting, an Antifa meeting, everyone's gonna have blue hair and septum rings. That's how they look, how the Mar-a-Lago crew looks. Still, for everything that gave her pause about Trump and the MAGA faithful, there was left to remind Greene of what she had found truly appalling. By 24, Greene had become more politically sophisticated and less inclined to vilify the news media. But she continued to characterize Trump's Democratic opponents and their positions in the directest of terms, radical communist Kamala Harris, all of that. So he says, I have plans to meet Greene for a drink on the second day of the RNC, and an hour before we were to get together, she texted me to say she received a better offer. Trump had asked her to sit next to him that evening. As she sat beside the man she called, in her own convention speech, the founding father of the America First movement, Greene's status as the Athena figure in that movement was on display for all to see. In turn, Greene's belief in her MAGA Zeus was nearly absolute. Listen to this next part. Shortly after Trump secured the nomination, I convened a dinner with Greene, her boyfriend, Brian Glenn, and now the White House correspondent for the right wing outlet Real America's Voice, and two of my fellow Times reporters. At one point, I mentioned Trump's pledge to enact retribution against his perceived enemies. Greene's demeanor turned icy. President Trump, she crisply informed me, was focusing on saving America, not payback. Any suggestion to the contrary was asinine. She warned me that if my colleagues and I continued to pursue this ridiculous line of inquiry, she would get up and leave. That's really interesting. I just think not that there's anything weird there, but I just feel like it belies a savviness to her that from that the way he described that first meeting. And she had her fiance there too. So more than a year after that dinner, I asked Greene, was there ever a point before 2025 where you thought, you know what, Trump acts like a man of the people and he talks about the forgotten men and women of this country, but I'm not so sure. I was just so naive and outside of politics, Green said with a wink of a smile, that it was easy for me to naively believe. Let's see. I don't wanna read this whole thing. Oh, sorry. I can't skip over this part. This is the best part, and then we can skip to the end because this really is the best part. Green's eagerness to get to work. I want you to keep in mind that description, that word that he used to describe her. Green's eagerness to get to work became all too evident to the new administration. She sent long, insistent text messages to Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, along with her deputy, James Blair, and cabinet members. Greene's congressional staff had long been accustomed to her "I will not be ignored" tactics, a playbook they jokingly referred to as bitch, bully, and bulldoze. But these recipients were the most powerful government officials in America, and in retrospect, the personal slights between her and them may have foreshadowed the ill feelings that would ensue. According to a person with knowledge of the matter, Greene's missives would come off as pushy, unconstructive, and at times disrespectful. She wasn't as prolific with me as she apparently was with others, Wiles told me. I would sometimes know when she texted the president because I'd be dispatched to do something she was asking for. I couldn't get to all of her texts, but I acted when I could. They hated her. They hated her. She was annoying. She texted them all the time. I would not be ignored. They called it her "I will not be ignored" tactics. Butch, bitch, bully, and bulldoze. Bitch, bully, and bulldoze. That's what Trump's staff said about her. Do we need to know anything else? Is it starting to make sense? Do you understand? She didn't get what she wanted. It started to change her affections, and that happens to women a lot. Women who don't get what they want from their husbands, their affections start to wander. I gotta keep it. This has been, how long have I been going on now? This is almost an hour to read this article. It's fine. I really don't think you have to read it. I mean, kudos to this author. He definitely put in his time, but I know he's dropping you little clues there too. By the way, he says, let me read this. In retrospect, the personal slights between her and them may have foreshadowed the ill feelings. Personal slights. You see what I mean? She was talking shit. That's what she was doing. She was talking shit to people because she got to sit next to President Trump and he thanked her and she was on the MAGA team and she thought she was somebody. We call that smelling yourself. That girl was smelling herself. It's just, if people do, they get caught up. People get caught up. And you think it can't happen to somebody who gets that high up in their career because you think, gosh, you've got to be so disciplined to get there. But it can happen so easy to you too and to me too. By the way, none of us are above it. We are not. That's why you have to be rooted in something real. Should have a family and your God, because none of us are above it. I really don't think so. I just think it's intoxicating. And I think it's a rare person who doesn't let themselves get caught up in it. She's got some stuff to say about Mike Johnson. I want you to know that Johnson is not our speaker, she told me in December. He's not our leader. And in the legislative branch, a totally separate body of government, he is literally 100% under direct orders from the White House. And many, many Republicans are so furious about that, but they're cowards. No, they don't understand what's going on. She may be absolutely right about Johnson, but that is the guy we need right now because there's an agenda that has to get pushed through Congress. So they have to act as a team, not a bunch of representatives of different smaller communities. For now, I think it's an uncomfortable reality because I do understand the notion they're there to serve their constituents, but the constituency right now is America. It's all of America. They're just acting as a team. Is Johnson under the control of the president? No, but I think, does he know what's going to be good for America and his career? Yeah. Green told me it began to dawn on her that when it came to the president, loyalty is a one-way street. It ends like that whenever it ends like that whenever it suits him. Being disabused of the idea that subservience would be rewarded appeared to have a liberating effect on her. In June, Greene did an about-face on the president's One Big Beautiful Bill after conceding that she voted for it without realizing that it contained a provision that would prevent states from enforcing restrictions on AI. I've never believed her on that. I don't know about the AI thing. I just don't believe that that's what she cared about. She broke from Trump on that. On that same day, Greene and roughly a dozen other House Republicans who also had reservations about the bill were summoned to the Oval Office. In Greene's recollection, Trump focused his wrath on her. When you have a group of kids, she said, you pick the one that is the most well-behaved, that always does everything right, and you beat the living shit out of them because then the rest of them are like, man, holy shit. If dad does that to her, what would he do to me? Of the whole psychology of that statement. Wow. Again, I just think Trump makes people more of who they really are. I bet you if we, I mean, and this is not a crazy guess because this is describing a lot of women in modern America these days, but I bet you she's got daddy issues. Elon does too, and much respect for Elon, but it's very clear that, in a way, maybe he was hurt by Trump, that perhaps he was looking to Trump like a father, but that's not the kind of guy Trump is. He wasn't looking at it the same way. A lot of these people, because Trump is so powerful, and I think he's kind. I think in person he's kind, and that's seductive. And I don't mean that to sound as negative as it does, but I just think he's magnetic. I think that's what it is. It has to be, right? It has to be. Look at him. Look at his life. Look at where he is. He's magnetic. He draws people to him. But there are some people who are so wounded that when they don't get what they want, they lash out or their affections shift, their affections change. They go to the next daddy. They find the next daddy. Oh, wow, just so much and complaining. She really wasn't trying to be crazy. During the 2024 campaign, Trump indicated a willingness to release all the files pertaining to his former friend, Jeffrey Epstein. That's how he wrote it. His former friend, Jeffrey Epstein, who died in prison. Okay, we all know. Jeff Epstein didn't kill himself. Greene says now it didn't register with her at the time that Trump never exhibited much relish for the subject and that the matter and for that matter, the numerous photos that had circulated showing him palling around with Epstein. The reason for her lack of concern, as Greene explained it to me, might seem improbable to anyone who is unfamiliar with how the mainstream press and the right wing media cover the same story differently or not at all. And that's an incredible statement for him to make, too. He doesn't know. There are people out there who are unfamiliar that these two sides cover different parts of the story. Incredible. Again, we live in siloed information systems. They know nothing. They know nothing. They don't even know that we live in silos. That's amazing. Anyway, and Trump was just one of several. And then for me, I'd seen Bill Clinton isn't on the flight logs for his plane like 20 something times. So for people like me, it wasn't suspicious. And then we'd heard the general stories of how Epstein used to be a member at Mar-a-Lago, but Trump kicked him out. Why would I think he's done anything wrong, right? So for Greene, the decades that Epstein spent eluding justice for exploiting and sexually assaulting countless girls and young women represents everything wrong with Washington. After the hearing, so they had the Epstein hearing. She says, after the hearing, Greene held a news conference at which she threatened to identify some of the men who had abused the women. Greene says she didn't know those names herself, but that she would have gotten them from the victims. Trump called Greene to voice his displeasure. Greene was in her Capitol Hill office, and according to a staff member, everyone in the suite of rooms could hear him yelling at her as she listened to him on speakerphone. Greene says she expressed her perplexity over his intransigence. According to Greene, Trump replied, "My friends will get hurt." Again, that sounds so Jussie Smollett. And it's not because I don't believe Trump can sound mean or it's not that I don't believe Trump can be mean. I just have never heard him utter. It's just a weird way to phrase it for Trump. My friends could get hurt. My friends will get hurt. She urged Trump to invite some of Epstein's female victims to the Oval Office. She says he angrily informed her that they had done nothing to merit the honor. Bullshit, Marjorie. Bullshit. Bullshit on that one. That Trump said of sexual abuse victims, they have done nothing to merit the honor. Let me stop here. Marjorie, you're full of shit. Why didn't you release the names? Why didn't you release names? But you can still release the names, honey. You said, I don't have the names, but I could have gotten them from the victims. Go get them. You clearly are in contact with them. Why don't you release the names? Why don't any of those women stand up and release a list of names? It's just a game, everybody. It's just a game. Okay. It's just a game, and she's a lousy player. Ro Khanna said nice things about her. I want to get to the part where I got to get to the end here. I got to wrap this up. Okay. She's been exorcised. She's been excommunicated from the movement, and now she's going on her media tour. So he's followed her all the way down. And I think this is really important. She joined The View, ABC's popular morning show that takes a mostly liberal stance. This is how he describes it, a mostly liberal stance. One person who was on the set told me that the hosts were braced for combative dialogue, but Greene told me that she instantly felt comfortable in their company. Those women were the same type of women that have always been my friends. College educated, affluent, suburban, white. That's who I am. So I couldn't wait to talk to these ladies. I was so tired of toxic politics. That's who she is, everybody. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene, co-host of The View. Co-host of The View. Greene told me she had no illusions about how her media mini tour would be received in the White House. All of a sudden, I'm in places. Greene made her voice sound stern to mimic disapproving Republican leaders. That you're not supposed to be, little MTG. You get back in your little effing box in the kitchen and shut up and cook us dinner and stay there. Oh, girl, please stop. 3/4 of Trump administration is women. I think it's too many women, to be honest, but 3/4 are women. Give me a break. Give me a, this is how you know she is gone. Let her go. Don't sweat it. Don't sweat it. It's not a split. It is not a split. A split is when someone is still working on your side and they've just split from the other groups. It's not a split. She's not on our side. He's right to call her a traitor. He might actually know some more about her. He might actually know some more about the situation. You'll notice she didn't release the text. She hasn't released any recordings, any transcripts. Not a single staffer has come out and said, this is what I heard in a detailed report, because maybe you don't want to republish the president's voicemail or text. But surely the president wouldn't send those things if he didn't think those things could go out to the public. It just, the Jussie Smollett of it all. She's on her apology tour. She's worried she's going to be murdered for calling someone a traitor. Let's see. She thought of her constituents, like her neighbor across the street, a nice lady who supported both Greene and Trump, but would soon be inundated with TV ads demanding that this is her deciding that she shouldn't run again, but would soon be inundated with TV ads demanding that she choose one over the other. She thought of what it would be like to return to Washington as a marked woman, what it would be like in a mostly Democrat-controlled House, blah, blah, blah. She was mulling things over in her head on Wednesday, November 21st, as she flew back home from Washington. Her fiance, Brian Glenn, sat next to her, offering a few edits. She called her 3 children, her chief of staff, Ed Buckham, and no one else. Then Glenn helped load up her text on a teleprompter. She sat in her living room couch and spoke to the camera for 14 minutes. The second tape felt right to her. Greene posted that at 8:01. Glenn forwarded it to me, along with other members of the media, 2 minutes later. Brian, Glenn, and this guy friends? I actually did try to look. I just did a search, just a Google search to see if their names came up together in any spot, and they didn't. But it sounds to me like all these people are friends. And if this was the first person that he forwarded it to, I don't know what I'm going to do. She says, Greene told me in mid-December, sitting beside her was Glenn, who in a few days would become her fiance and start making plans to move to Georgia from Washington. I agreed to not quote him, given that his job as a White House correspondent for Real America's Voice has been showing unflagging support for Trump, and he was not in the mood to stay on script. More than any other journalist, Glenn has enjoyed extraordinary and sustained proximity to the president over the last year. It's fair to say that nothing Greene has said or done in recent months has met with his stern disagreement. Again, I don't know. This is a pro-Trump. I think it's weird is all I'm saying. It's none of my business what they do over there. I'm not judging them for it. I'm just saying that's kind of crazy, right? Like, I wouldn't really take him that seriously. I guess I wouldn't take him that seriously. She spoke longingly of the day when she could walk unnoticed into a restaurant or a grocery store, recalling a conversation she had with the host of 60 Minutes, who interviewed her. She said, the funniest thing was when Leslie Stahl said, it's hard to give up the limelight. And I'm looking at her across at her, and I'm thinking, I don't ever want to be like that when I'm her age. So y'all had a conversation about the limelight. That's what I'm reading from that statement. Leslie's been in this game a long time, honey. She was not telling you that she loves the limelight and it's hard to give it up. That might be true. I'm not saying she doesn't think that. That's not what she was telling you. She was doing what good old Robert was doing to you. She was mirroring you so that you would say things to her and be more friendly to her and give her more statements. And you did, right? She made you think that she cares about the limelight above everything else. And frankly, your statement sounds like you do. I don't care. And yet here you are, a New York Times front page piece. Oh, I can't wait till I can just go walk down the street in anonymity. You can do that tomorrow. You could drop out tomorrow and go back to Georgia. And in 3 months, everyone will forget about you. They'll forget your name. You can do it. You don't want to. She doesn't want to. She says, she goes on, she thinks we're going to see more war. Trump's going to maniac, who's going to get us into war. Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. Here's how it closes out. But perhaps even to her own surprise, Greene was not the person, was not that person any longer, the pro MAGA person. Everyone's like, she's changed, Greene said to me. I haven't changed my views, but I've matured. I've developed depth. And there was more, she said, to the education she'd received. I've learned Washington, and I've come to understand the brokenness of the place. If none of us is learning lessons here, and we can't evolve and mature with our lessons, then what kind of people are we? Indeed. What kind of people are we? I feel like she's regressing. I don't feel like there's maturity here, but that's the point, isn't it? You go there, you see that the swamp exists. There's never been a better time to stick your foot in the door and get yourself established, and start figuring out how to move in the swamp in ways that you can still resist it. What a great time. And you had the greatest ally on your side, and you blew it because you couldn't be daddy's number one. And how many of those people have the Trump kids seen come and go in their lives? So by now, so many, so many. And I bet they recognize it. Those people come along and get really excited. Trump takes them under his wing, and they get really excited. And then, Trump moves on, or there's some kind of split, or they realize this is not an unconditional relationship, right? You're not really his child. So it's not unconditional love. MTG, it's not unconditional love. Trump doesn't love you unconditionally. He's not God, and he's not your daddy. I think it's very interesting. I'm not sorry to see her go, but I do want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to her, because regardless of how I might feel about how she's peeling off now, or whatever her relationship to Real America's Voice is, it should Brian Glenn be getting that much access to the president while MTG is like this? I don't know. But regardless of all that, MTG was a voice for us when we needed one. And she did say the hard things when no one else would. And she did stand up when no one else would. And for that, she does deserve some reward. I believe she had that reward. Proximity is a reward in and of itself to the most influential figure on planet Earth. Yeah, that's a reward. And if you had played this out to the end, you probably would have had it made. But it wasn't enough for you. It wasn't enough. So I don't think that we're gonna lose anything with her. But we do owe her a debt of gratitude. And she did keep us on our feet. I think. I know for me, I got a lot of encouragement from her over the years, over the darkest years in the dark ages. I got lots of encouragement from her. And I think a lot of people did feel inspired by her in many ways. She deserves thanks for that. But that doesn't mean that we can't see that perhaps that was that was just a moment in time where her interests lined up with ours, and they no longer align. Thanks for your service. Bye, girl. Thank you. Next. Enjoy your host spot on The View or MS Now or wherever it is you're going from here. Definitely media. It's definitely media. All right. Well, I'm tired. That's it for me. Drop in the comments or wherever you see all of my stuff. justkiradavis.com, Kiradavis on X, justkiradavis on Instagram. My Christmas podcast is Journey to Christmas Land on Substack, YouTube, Instagram. Let me know what you think about Marjorie Taylor Greene. You gonna miss her? You're worried? I know this means then we have to replace her seat, but perhaps what will happen is we'll get someone we can really depend on, who's not going to be as swayed by the swamp. All right. Happy New Year, everybody. Tomorrow I'm doing my countdown of top Trump roles of 2025. You won't want to miss that. Catch you on the flip side. Love you guys.